I'll pretend to be my wife at Christmas, and I'll reward you at night in bed. If you accept this contract, I promise that the reward will be unforgettable. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment saying where you are watching from. Enjoy the story. Laura held the golden envelope with trembling hands. The proposal was absurd. Pretend to be the wife of a stranger during Christmas in exchange for $80,000. Enough to save the small decoration business she had inherited from her mother. Enough to change everything. But there was something in the way Thomas Mitchell had looked at her during the interview that made her question whether money would be the only currency of exchange. His office occupied the top floor of a mirrored building in downtown Toronto. Dark leather furniture, panoramic view, silence of power. Laura had felt small there, in her simple cotton dress and hands calloused from arranging floral decorations. Thomas looked like he was carved from cold marble. Impeccable suits, square jaw, amber-colored eyes that pierced through any defense. 38 years of ruthless business success, zero tolerance for failures, and one problem, his grandmother demanding he appear married at Christmas or lose control of the family business. "I need this to look real," he had said, sliding the contract across the desk. "My grandmother is perceptive. She detects lies from miles away." "And exactly what do you expect from me?" Laura asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Thomas leaned forward. His scent, wood, spices, and something indefinable invaded the space between them. "I expect you to look at me like I'm the love of your life, that you touch my arm naturally during conversations, that you smile when I enter the room," a pause, "and that you sleep in my bedroom during the 5 days we'll spend at the estate." Laura's blood froze. Sleep? Separate rooms would raise suspicions. His tone was professional, but something glinted in those amber eyes. "There's a couch. You'll have privacy." Now, 3 days later, Laura was sitting in Thomas's black Mercedes, driving through rural roads toward the countryside outside Montreal. The landscape of green mountains contrasted with the tension inside the car. Thomas drove in silence, focused. He wore dark jeans and a grey shirt with rolled-up sleeves, revealing tanned forearms and a watch that probably cost more than her apartment. Laura noticed how his fingers gripped the steering wheel with absolute firmness. Strong hands, capable. She quickly looked away. "Nervous?" His voice broke the silence. "Should I be? My family is intense." Thomas slowed down as he entered a dirt road. "My grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, built an empire from scratch. My father died when I was 16 years old. She raised me to take over the business." A pause. "She also has well-defined expectations about who I should marry. Let me guess, someone from the same social circle?" "Exactly." Thomas glanced at her quickly. "That's why you're perfect." Laura frowned. "Because I'm ordinary?" "Because you're real." The answer came quickly, almost harshly. "My grandmother wants me to be happy, not to make a strategic alliance." The gate of the estate appeared ahead, wrought iron with the Mitchell family crest. Beyond it, an avenue of imperial palms led to a colonial-style manor house. White walls, clay roof, wide verandas decorated with Christmas lights that glowed even under the afternoon sun. It was stunning. It was intimidating. "Last chance to back out," Thomas murmured, stopping the car before the gate. Laura thought of her mother's business, of overdue bills, of the dream she couldn't allow to die. "Let's do this." Something changed in his face, an almost smile, approval. Thomas extended his hand. "Then welcome to the family, wife." The touch was electric, long fingers wrapping hers with surprising warmth. Laura felt a shiver run up her spine, and for the first time since accepting the proposal, she understood that the real danger wasn't the deception. It was how her body reacted to this man. The gate opened. Thomas intertwined his fingers with hers, naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years, and accelerated toward the house. A woman with white hair, pinned in an elegant bun, waited for them on the veranda. Mrs. Eleanor wore a beige linen dress and a pearl necklace, 70-some years of impeccable posture and sharp gaze. "Thomas," her voice was soft but laden with authority, You're late. Sorry, grandmother. The traffic. And this must be Laura? Mrs. Eleanor descended the steps with the grace of a queen. Her eyes, the same amber color as her grandson, examined Laura from head to toe. The woman who finally tamed my impossible grandson. Laura felt Thomas's hand squeeze hers gently. A warning, an anchor. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Eleanor. The pleasure is mine, dear. The woman smiled, but it was a smile that measured, calculated, dissected. Thomas told me a lot about you. A decorator, right? How romantically appropriate for someone who decorates his life. The comment had hidden thorns between petals. Laura transforms spaces, Thomas interjected, pulling her closer. His arm wrapped around her waist with ownership. She has a rare talent for seeing beauty where others see only functionality. The warmth of his hand through her dress fabric was disconcerting. Laura forced herself to relax against him, as a real wife would. How lovely, Thomas. Mrs. Eleanor tilted her head. You are different. Different how? Lighter. Like you finally found something that matters more than your business. The tension in Thomas's body was palpable, but he maintained his smile. I found everything that matters. The statement sounded dangerously sincere. Mrs. Eleanor studied them for another moment, then clapped her hands. Well, we won't stand here. You must be exhausted. Teresa prepared the master bedroom in the east wing. A mischievous glint. And dinner is at 8. We have much to discuss. As they followed a servant through the house, Laura felt the weight of the performance. Oil paintings, crystal chandeliers, period furniture. Everything screamed tradition, heritage, expectations. The bedroom was spacious, king-size bed with white canopy, large windows overlooking the gardens, stone fireplace, and yes, a green velvet couch in a corner. The door closed behind them. The silence was dense. Thomas loosened his tie, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. She suspects. How can you be sure? I know my grandmother. She's testing. He turned to Laura. We need to be more convincing. More convincing how? Thomas took 2 steps toward her. Laura instinctively stepped back, but her back found the wall. He placed one hand on each side of her head, trapping her without touching. Real couples have physical intimacy. His voice was low, raspy, casual touches. Prolonged gazes, body language that says, you know each other deeply. Laura's heart was hammering. I understand the theory. Theory won't convince Mrs. Eleanor. His eyes dropped to her mouth. We need chemistry. And you think chemistry can be faked? A muscle jumped in his jaw. I think chemistry already exists between us, since the first day in my office. You felt it too. It wasn't a question. Laura raised her chin, challenging. Arrogance is different from confidence, Thomas. A slow smile formed on his lips, dangerous, provocative. Then prove me wrong. The air between them vibrated. Laura placed her hand on his chest, feeling his racing heart beneath the shirt. She moved it slowly up to his neck, where his pulse beat erratically. Are you nervous, husband? Thomas's eyes darkened. Be careful with the game you're starting, Laura. You set the rules. She pulled away before the moment became irreversible, grabbing her suitcase and heading toward the bathroom. I'm going to change for dinner. When the door closed, Laura leaned against it, breathing deeply. Her legs were trembling. Her whole body vibrated with a frightening intensity. 5 days. She had to last 5 days pretending to be the wife of this man without losing her mind or her heart. Dinner was an elegant trial. Mahogany table, bohemian crystals, silver cutlery. Besides Mrs. Eleanor and Thomas, there were 3 cousins, 2 aunts, and Uncle Marcus, second in command of the company. They all analyzed her with barely disguised curiosity. So, Laura, began Aunt Catherine, delicately cutting the medallion in Madeira sauce, how did you and Thomas meet? The question had been rehearsed. Thomas had given her a script during the drive. Actually, it was through work, Laura smiled, feeling Thomas's hand find hers on the table. I decorated his office 6 months ago. We discussed a lot about every detail. Discussed? Mrs. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Laura is stubborn. Thomas interjected, caressing the back of her hand with his thumb. The gesture was casual, but it sent waves of heat through Laura's arm. She insisted I needed plants in the office. I told her I didn't have time to care for them. "And what did you do?" asked Cousin Elizabeth, fascinated. "I showed up every week to water them personally." Laura looked at Thomas, forcing tenderness into her eyes, until he admitted the space had improved. "And until I realized," Thomas said softly, turning completely to her, "that I was anxiously waiting for Thursdays, not for the plants." The silence at the table was almost palpable. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, it seems someone finally softened our Thomas's heart of stone." "He doesn't have a heart of stone." The words came out before Laura could filter them. "He just has a fear of being hurt again." The sentence hung in the air. Thomas froze. Something crossed his face. Surprise, vulnerability, something dangerously real. Mrs. Eleanor leaned forward. "Again?" Laura perceived the mistake. She shouldn't know anything about his past. She was just a decorator who had met him 6 months ago, not someone who had studied his history, but Thomas squeezed her hand, saving her. "Laura knows about Catherine." His voice was controlled. "I told her everything. I didn't want secrets between us." Catherine. His ex-fiancée, who had left him at the altar 3 years ago for a European heir. Thomas had mentioned it briefly during preparation, but without emotional details. "I understand." Mrs. Eleanor studied Laura with new interest. "And you weren't afraid that history would repeat itself?" "Afraid?" Laura held the matriarch's gaze. "Fear is living halfway because of the past. Thomas deserves someone who sees him for what he is, not for what he lost." The silence was now different, laden with respect. Cousin Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "That's so beautiful. You're perfect together." Dinner continued with lighter conversations. Christmas stories, family jokes, plans for the holiday feast. Laura laughed at the right moments, answered questions naturally, allowed Thomas to constantly touch her, hand on shoulder, fingers adjusting a strand of hair, arm around her waist when they stood from the table. Every touch was fire. When they finally went up to the bedroom after 2 hours of intense performance, Laura was exhausted. Thomas closed the door and slowly released the air. "You were incredible. Did I invent too much? The part about Catherine? It was perfect." He turned to her. "How did you know you should humanize me?" "Intuition." Laura took off her shoes, feeling relief in her feet. "Your grandmother doesn't want a deception. She wants to know that you're happy. And do I seem happy?" The question had a strange weight. Laura found his eyes. "I think you don't allow yourself to be happy. There's a difference." Thomas took a step toward her, then another. He stopped so close that Laura could feel the heat emanating from him. "You analyze me too well for someone who's known me for 3 days. 3 days can be enough time to see what someone is hiding. And what am I hiding?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Fear." Laura raised her hand, almost touching his face, but stopping centimeters away. "You're afraid that no one will love you for who you are, so you pretend you don't need love." Thomas's eyes were embers. "Be careful, Laura. Keep saying truths like that and I might start believing this marriage is real." The air was too charged, too dense. Laura stepped back. "I'm going to shower." She locked herself in the bathroom, opening the faucet with trembling hands. The face in the mirror was flushed, the eyes bright. She looked in love. No, it couldn't be. This was work. $80,000, 5 days. Nothing more. But when she emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, wearing a simple cotton pajama, and found Thomas already lying on the couch with only sweatpants, his bare chest and defined muscles exposed in the soft light of the bedside lamp, something tightened in her stomach. He was reading a book, reading glasses on his face that made him look younger, vulnerable. "You can have the bed," he said without raising his eyes. "I sleep well anywhere." "Thomas." "Good night, Laura." The dismissal was clear. Laura lay down in the huge bed, feeling ridiculously alone. The mattress was soft, the Egyptian cotton sheets were perfect, but everything felt empty. From the couch, she heard his breathing, slow, controlled. Neither of them was sleeping. And Laura knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that the next 4 nights would be a torture of desire and restraint. The contract said she would be rewarded, but no one mentioned that the price would be her heart. Laura woke to the sound of birds and golden light invading the room. For a confused moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Thomas. He was on the balcony, just in jeans, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching the estate wake. The morning light caressed his back, drawing shadows on his muscles, transforming his tan skin into heated bronze. He was devastatingly beautiful. As if feeling her gaze, Thomas turned. "Good morning." His voice was hoarse with sleep, too intimate. "Good morning." Laura sat up in bed, pulling the sheets to her chest. "What time is it?" 7. "My grandmother likes to have coffee with family at 8. He entered the room, leaving the cup on her nightstand. "I brought you coffee. 2 sugars and a little milk, right?" Laura blinked. "How do you know?" An almost smile. "I watched you sweeten your coffee yesterday during the meeting in my office, before signing the contract." He had noticed. In such a small detail, he had paid attention. "Thank you." Thomas nodded and headed to the bathroom. "Wear something comfortable. My grandmother will want to show us the estate." When he disappeared, Laura held the cup, feeling the warmth in her hands. The coffee was perfect, exactly how she liked it. It was just attention to detail. Thomas was a successful businessman. He observed everything. It didn't mean anything, but her heart beat faster anyway. 20 minutes later, they came down together for coffee. Thomas wore a white linen shirt and beige pants. Laura chose a light floral dress, discreet but feminine. Mrs. Eleanor was already waiting at the table on the veranda, surrounded by baskets of bread, homemade jams, fruits, and natural juices. "Ah, the couple of the moment," she smiled. "You know, I woke up thinking about you two, how Thomas finally seems at peace." Thomas pulled out the chair for Laura to sit, then settled beside her. "You were always dramatic, grandmother." "It's not drama, it's observation." Mrs. Eleanor poured orange juice for Laura. "You spent 3 years building walls. It's good to see someone tearing them down." "Laura is good at demolitions," Thomas joked, but his eyes were serious when they met hers. After coffee, Mrs. Eleanor insisted on the walk. She took them down trails between orange and mango trees, showed the lake where Thomas learned to fish, the chapel where generations of the family had married. "I thought perhaps you'd like to marry again here," Mrs. Eleanor commented casually. "A real ceremony with the whole family present." Laura almost tripped. Thomas held her by the elbow. "We got married at City Hall by preference, grandmother. We wanted something intimate." "I understand." But Mrs. Eleanor's tone made it clear she understood nothing. "Laura, dear, could I borrow my grandson for a few minutes? Business matters." It was an order disguised as a request. "Of course." Laura watched them walk away, talking in low voices. Thomas had his tense posture again. Businessman, heir, man under pressure. She walked to the chapel, a small stone structure covered in ivy. She pushed the wooden door and entered. Inside, light filtering through the stained glass created colorful mosaics on the floor. Dark wooden benches, simple altar, an old cross. It smelled of incense and memories. Laura sat on a bench, looking at the altar. How many people had married here? How many eternal love vows? How many promises? And here she was, pretending a marriage for money. Thoughtful? Thomas was at the entrance, hands in pockets. "Did your grandmother finish the interrogation?" "For now." He entered, walking down the central aisle. "She suspects." Laura's heart squeezed. "You think she found out?" "Not exactly." Thomas sat beside her, so close their shoulders touched. "She thinks we got married too fast because you're pregnant." "What?" "I calmed things down, but—" He turned to her. "We need to intensify the performance, especially at night." "At night?" "The rooms aren't soundproof. If we spend 5 nights in complete silence, they'll suspect." Laura felt her blood boil. "You want me to make noise?" "I want it to seem like we're a real couple." His voice was low, almost dangerous. "Newlyweds tend to be expressive. That wasn't in the contract." "No, but $80,000 were. And you need that money as much as I need this deception. It was true. Laura hated it, but it was true. So what do you suggest? That I moan your name every night? Thomas's eyes darkened dangerously. If you can do it convincingly, yes. The challenge hung between them. Laura stood abruptly. You're impossible. And you're too proud to admit you feel the same as I do. She froze. The same as you what? Thomas stood as well, closing the distance between them. This tension, this inconvenient and inopportune attraction that's complicating a simple agreement. There's nothing. Don't lie. He held her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. Your eyes betray you. The way you breathe when I'm close. How you tremble when I touch you. That's just chemistry. Yes, and we're going to use it to our advantage. Before Laura could protest, Thomas pulled her toward him and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was hunger, need, explosion of 3 days of pent-up tension. His lips were firm, demanding, taking away her every ability to think. Laura should push him away, should remember that this was theater. But her body had its own ideas. She melted into him, opening her mouth, allowing his tongue to explore, claim, conquer. Thomas's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and Laura could feel every inch of him pressed against her. It was dangerous. It was wrong. It was perfect. When they finally separated, both were breathless. This, Thomas murmured against her lips, is what we're going to do convincingly. Laura pushed his chest, pulling away. You kissed me in your family's chapel. Do you have no respect? Respect? He laughed, but it was a sound without humor. I'm faking a marriage to deceive my grandmother. I think respect left days ago. You're cynical. I'm realistic. Thomas ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Look, Laura, neither of us planned this, but it's happening, and we have 2 choices. Pretend the attraction doesn't exist and fail spectacularly, or use it to make this deception convincing. And then we go back to our lives. You rich, me free from family pressure. Simple, transactional, cold. So why did it hurt so much? Laura nodded. Right, let's do it your way. She left the chapel without looking back, but she felt his eyes burning on her back, and she knew the kiss had changed everything. The afternoon passed in a blur. Lunch with the family, educated conversations, forced laughs. Thomas kept his hand on her thigh under the table, a possessive touch that left Laura hyper-aware of every movement. When Aunt Catherine suggested the women go to town for Christmas shopping, Mrs. Eleanor declined. Leave the lovebirds alone. They're on their honeymoon after all. The insinuation was clear. Back in the bedroom, Laura locked herself in the bathroom again. She needed space, air, distance from that man who was disorganizing her thoughts. But when she came out, she found Thomas on the balcony, tense. We have a problem. Another one? Catherine is coming to dinner. Laura froze. Your ex-fiancée? My uncle invited her. She's the daughter of an important partner. Thomas punched the iron railing. I can't refuse without causing embarrassment. What does she want? I don't know. But there was something on his face. Anger. Old wound. Catherine has a habit of appearing when I least expect her, like she never tore me apart. The raw vulnerability in his voice did something to Laura. She went to him, placing her hand on his arm. Then we're going to show her that you've moved on, that you found someone who's worth it. Thomas looked at her hand. Why do you care? Because no one deserves to be humiliated twice by the same person. He held her hand, intertwining fingers. You're dangerous, Laura. Dangerous how? You make me want things I can't have. Her heart raced. Thomas, forget it. It was just... He released her hand. Get ready. Tonight is going to be intense. Catherine Winters entered the dining room like a storm of elegance. Red silk dress, discreet but expensive jewelry, impeccable blonde hair. She was in her late 30s, magazine beauty and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thomas, she glided to him, completely ignoring Laura. You look amazing. The years have been generous. Catherine. His voice was ice. Let me introduce my wife, Laura. Only then did Catherine look at her. The gaze was pure evaluation, top to bottom, measuring, judging. finding flaws. Wife, what a surprise! The tone carried subtle poison. Thomas always said he would never marry. I suppose some people change, or find reasons to change, Laura countered gently, grabbing Thomas's arm with possessiveness. Something flashed in Catherine's eyes. Dinner was tense. Catherine directed all questions to Thomas, systematically ignoring Laura. She spoke of shared memories, trips they took together, inside jokes. Remember Capri, Thomas? That hotel on the cliff's edge? Not really. You said you'd never seen a more beautiful sunset. Catherine. Mrs. Eleanor intervened firmly. I think those memories belong to the past. Thomas has a new life now. Of course. Catherine smiled, but there was contained fury there. I'm just curious about how everything happened so fast. 6 months of dating, civil marriage with no one present seems so impulsive. When you know, Thomas said, taking Laura's hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles. The gesture was public, declarative. Catherine paled. Well, I hope it lasts. Relationships based on passion tend to burn out fast, or transform into something deeper, Laura said calmly, when there's respect and trust. The silence that followed was cutting. Mrs. Eleanor clapped her hands. Dessert! Teresa prepared special panettone. But the tension didn't dissipate. When they finally went up to the bedroom, Thomas was visibly shaken. I'm sorry about that. You don't need to apologize for her. Catherine always was. He stopped. Complicated. And she still loves you. Thomas laughed bitterly. Catherine loves power, status. I was convenient, until she found something better. And now? Now she realized the European wasn't what she expected, and wants to come back. Laura felt something twisting in her chest. Do you want her to come back? Thomas turned to her so abruptly that Laura stepped back. How can you ask that? Because I saw how you looked at her. Like I was remembering the worst pain of my life? He took a step toward her. Catherine taught me that love is a lie, that promises mean nothing, that in the end everyone chooses the better deal. Not everyone. No? He was so close now, dangerously close. Then why are you here, Laura? For love or for $80,000? The question was a slap. That's unfair. The truth rarely is fair. Laura raised her chin. Fine. You want truth? I'm here for money. I'm not lying about that, but unlike Catherine, I'm not pretending to have feelings. You knew from the start exactly what this was. No deception, no lies. Thomas went still. So the kisses? The way you tremble when I touch you? Chemistry. Like you yourself said, it doesn't change our agreement. It doesn't change, but his voice was hoarse. So tonight, when we need to convince whoever is listening that we're a passionately in love couple, it will just be another performance. Yes. Excellent. He started to unbutton his shirt. So let's rehearse. Laura froze. Rehearse? You heard Catherine. She doubts. My grandmother doubts. We need to be convincing. He took off his shirt, throwing it on the chair. And random moans aren't going to convince anyone. They need to sound authentic. Laura's heart raced. Thomas, we're not going to do anything you don't want. He approached. But we'll establish boundaries. Create sounds, simulations, without crossing lines. It was rational, professional, transactional. So why did it seem so dangerous? Fine. How do we do this? Thomas indicated the bed. Lie down there. What? I need to know what sounds you naturally make. When you're relaxed, when touched gently. Laura took a deep breath. It was work. It was part of the agreement. She lay on the bed, rigid. Thomas lay beside her, not touching, just nearby. Breathe, she obeyed. Now imagine, he murmured, his voice a dark velvet, that my hand is moving across your arm, slowly, feeling every inch of skin. Laura closed her eyes. She could feel him without touch, the heat, the presence. My hand moves up your shoulder, neck, holds your face. An involuntary sigh escaped her. That. His voice was even lower. Exactly like that. Natural. Thomas, say my name again, like you need it. Thomas. This time it sounded like a plea. He leaned down, his lips inches from hers. Now imagine I kiss you. Slow at first, tasting, then deeper. Laura moaned softly. Perfect. But there was tension in his voice. Control fragmenting. You're perfect. She opened her eyes. Thomas was looking at her like he was in agony. Desire and restraint warring on his face. We can stop, she whispered. No. He pulled away abruptly, getting out of bed. That was sufficient. But the obvious erection through his sweatpants proved otherwise. Thomas went straight to the bathroom. Laura heard the shower turn on. Cold water, probably. She lay in bed, body vibrating, heart racing. This was more than an agreement. It was becoming dangerous. And the worst part, she didn't want it to stop. 2 days passed in a strange dance of intimacy and distance. During the day, they were the perfect couple, holding hands, exchanging prolonged glances, stealing quick kisses when someone was watching. Mrs. Eleanor seemed increasingly satisfied. Catherine disappeared after that first dinner. But at night, in the bedroom, the tension was unbearable. They never rehearsed again like that first night, but the memory hovered between them. Thomas slept on the couch, rigid. Laura pretended to sleep, but was hyper-aware of every movement. On the morning of the third day, Mrs. Eleanor announced a family tradition. Christmas tree decoration! Everyone participates! The main room was transformed. A 4-meter tree dominated the space. Boxes of old ornaments were brought from the basement. Blown glass balls, porcelain angels, crystal stars. This tree, Mrs. Eleanor explained as everyone helped, is more than 50 years old. My husband brought it from Muskoka on our first trip together. There was love and nostalgia in her voice. Thomas was high on a ladder, reaching the upper branches. Laura was below, passing ornaments to him. Be careful, she warned when he leaned precariously. Worried about me, wife? Worried that you'll fall and I'll have to deal with your family alone? He laughed, a genuine sound, light. You handle my family very well. They're good people. They are. Thomas came down the ladder, standing in front of her. And you're being incredible, better than I imagined. There was something in the way he looked at her. It wasn't performance. It was real. Thank you, Laura murmured. Cousin Elizabeth interrupted the moment. Hey, lovebirds! Family rule. Couples place the angel on top together. Thomas and Laura exchanged a look. Let's go, he said, taking the old porcelain angel. They climbed the ladder together, Thomas behind Laura, his body pressed against hers for support. Place it there, he instructed gently, pointing to the top. Laura stretched. Thomas held her waist firmly. I've got you. The double meaning didn't go unnoticed. When the angel was in place, the whole family applauded. Make a wish, Aunt Catherine exclaimed. Laura closed her eyes. Let this be real. The thought came before she could stop it. When she opened her eyes, Thomas was staring at her intensely. What did you wish for? You don't tell wishes. Why not? Because they might not come true. Something crossed his face. Understanding. Pain. Laura. Thomas, I need to show you something. Uncle Marcus interrupted, waving him over. Company documents. Urgent. Thomas hesitated but nodded. I'll be right back. Laura was left alone with the illuminated tree. He's different with you. Mrs. Eleanor appeared beside her, also admiring the decoration. Different how? Lighter, less haunted. The older woman turned to her. My grandson has been carrying a lot of guilt and anger since Catherine. He shut himself off, became just numbers and strategies. But with you, I see the boy who used to dream. Laura felt a knot in her throat. Mrs. Eleanor, I know you got married fast. I know many will doubt, but when I look at you two together, I see truth. She held Laura's hand. Don't let my grandson sabotage his own happiness. He has a talent for it. It was painful to receive this trust, knowing everything was a lie. I'll do my best. That's all I can ask. When Mrs. Eleanor walked away, Laura felt the weight of guilt. They were deceiving a good woman, an entire family, for money, for convenience. There was something deeply wrong about it. She went up to the bedroom, needing a moment alone. But opening the door, she found Thomas on the phone, tense. I don't care what he's offering. The answer is no. No. He hung up with force. Problem? Laura asked. My uncle is negotiating with a competitor behind my back, wants to sell company shares. Thomas threw the phone on the bed. All this damn fake marriage, is to keep control of the company. And now it seems I could lose it anyway. Your grandmother wouldn't allow it. Emma, my grandmother is aging. Marcus has persuasive power. He ran his hands through his face. Maybe I should give up, let everything go, start over. You don't think that, don't I? He looked at her. And if I did, and if I decided that none of this is worth it, Laura took a step toward him, then you'd be giving up the legacy your father built, that your grandmother protected, that you transformed into an empire. At what cost? My sanity, my ability to trust anyone. Thomas, you know what the worst part is? He laughed bitterly. These last 3 days, pretending this marriage, have been the happiest in years. How pathetic is that? Laura's heart stopped. What are you saying? He closed the distance between them in 2 steps. That we've crossed every line we established, that this isn't just an agreement anymore. It can't be more. Why not? His voice was urgent now. Why can't it be? We get along well together, we have chemistry. You get along well with my family. You what? Thomas held her face. I don't want this to end. Laura felt tears burning her eyes. Thomas, this was based on a lie from the start. How can you build something real on a lie? Then let's start fresh. Tomorrow, when everything ends, we start from zero. No contracts, no performance, just us two. It was tempting, so tempting, but there was a problem. And what if what you feel for me only exists because it's forbidden, because it has an expiration date? Thomas kissed her. It was different from the other kisses. It wasn't hunger. It was promise. It was hope. This, he murmured against her lips, is real. I don't know when it started. Maybe that first day in my office. Maybe when you defended me in front of my grandmother. But it's real. Laura wanted to believe, but fear was greater. I need to think. Of course. He pulled back, giving her space. We have time. But they didn't. The deception ended tomorrow, and Laura didn't know if her heart would survive the after. Christmas Eve dawned with light snow. Rare for that region, but it happened occasionally. The estate was covered with a thin white layer, transforming everything into a fairy tale. Mrs. Eleanor declared they would have a Christmas picnic outdoors. Enjoy while the snow doesn't melt, she insisted. Everyone went. Entire family, employees, even nearby neighbors. Blankets were spread under trees. Abundant food, hot mulled wine, laughter. It was magical. Thomas held Laura's hand as they walked a bit away from the group. You know what my grandmother told me yesterday? What? That you're the best thing that ever happened to me. That I can't let you get away. Laura swallowed dryly. She said that, and she's right. Thomas stopped, turning Laura to face him. I'm going to declare to my family today. I'm going to tell the truth about Catherine, about my fear, about how you changed everything. Thomas, don't. I need to do this. I don't want more lies. But before Laura could respond, a scream cut through the air. Thomas! It was Cousin Elizabeth running toward them, face pale. It's Mrs. Eleanor. She collapsed. The world slowed down. They ran back. Mrs. Eleanor was on the ground, unconscious. Uncle Marcus was already calling the ambulance. Grandmother! Thomas knelt beside her, holding her hand. Grandmother, wake up, please! Laura stood paralyzed, watching the scene. The family desperate, Thomas destroyed. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes. Paramedics working, stretcher, sirens. Only immediate family, a paramedic said when Thomas tried to enter. You're not her son. Only grandchildren. Thomas froze. Laura saw the moment he realized. He couldn't go. The rules were clear. Uncle Marcus entered the ambulance. I'll go with her. You take care of the family here. And then they were gone. Thomas stood there watching the ambulance disappear. Laura went to him, holding his arm. Let's go to the hospital. We drive ourselves. He nodded, mute. The drive was silent. Thomas drove on autopilot, hands firm on the wheel but gaze distant. At the hospital they discovered Mrs. Eleanor had a mild stroke, stable but needing observation. She'll be fine, the doctor assured, but she needs rest, no stress, no strong emotions. Thomas entered her room an hour later. Mrs. Eleanor was pale but conscious. She smiled when she saw him. My boy, grandmother. He kissed her forehead. You scared me. I'm sorry. She looked beyond him. Laura? Laura stepped forward. I'm here. Thank you for taking care of him. The words were sincere, full of trust. Guilt crushed Laura. When they left the room, Thomas was visibly shaken. I almost lost her. But she's okay. And what if she wasn't? And if it was too late? He looked at Laura. She could have died believing a lie, a deception I created just to maintain control of a damn company. Thomas, it's over. He took off the wedding ring. We're telling her the truth. Now. You can't. You heard the doctor. No stress, no strong emotions. So what do we do? Keep lying? Laura took the ring from his hand and placed it back on his finger. We keep pretending until she's strong enough to hear the truth. And until then, we do what we promised. We pretend. But as she said it, Laura knew she wasn't pretending anymore. She was in love with Thomas Mitchell, and that was the most dangerous truth of all. Christmas Eve was intimate, only the closest in Mrs. Eleanor's hospital room. Food brought from the estate, simple decorations, genuine love. Mrs. Eleanor insisted on celebrating. Life is too short to waste moments on fear. Thomas wouldn't let go of Laura's hand. He was different, quieter, more lost. When they finally returned to the hotel room they'd rented near the hospital, the estate was too far. Emotional exhaustion weighed on both. Can you sleep with me tonight? Thomas asked softly. Just sleep. I don't want to be alone. Laura nodded. They lay in bed, clothed, not touching. But after a few minutes, Thomas pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair, for everything, for involving you in this mess. I chose to be here for the money. At first, but now, she turned, meeting him in the darkness. Now I'm here because of you. Thomas stared at her intensely. Laura, I know this is complicated. I know it started wrong, but... She took a deep breath. But I fell in love with you. Really. Thomas went completely still. You can pretend you didn't hear if you want. Tomorrow I go back to Toronto and we can pretend this never. He kissed her. It was desperation and relief, promise and fear, everything. I also fell in love with you, he confessed when they separated. I fought against it, told myself it was just chemistry, convenience, but it's more, it's everything. Laura felt tears streaming down her face. What do we do now? We start fresh, the right way. He cleaned her tears away. No contracts, no performance, just us two building something real. And your grandmother. We'll tell her the truth when she's stronger. It will hurt, but we'll face it together. Together. The word sounded like a promise. They made love that night, slowly, tenderly, every touch laden with emotion, every kiss a confession, every sigh a prayer. It wasn't performance. It was real. And when they finally fell asleep intertwined, Laura knew she had crossed the point of no return. No matter what came after, she was his, and he was hers. The next day brought good news. Mrs. Eleanor was recovering well. She could be discharged in 2 days. But she'll need constant care, the doctor warned, and peace. The next week is critical. Thomas decided to stay at the hotel near the hospital. He didn't want to leave. Laura stayed with him. They spent those days in a strange limbo, visiting Mrs. Eleanor in the morning and afternoon. The rest of the time they were in the room talking, planning the future, making love with an urgency that came from fear of losing each other. When we go back to Toronto, Thomas said one night, I want to do this right. Real dinner dates. Meet your friends, your life, and introduce myself as your fake wife. As my real girlfriend, Laura smiled. That's going to be confusing for a lot of people. I don't care. Let them talk. But the bubble burst the morning Mrs. Eleanor was discharged. She insisted on talking to Thomas alone. When he came out of her room 20 minutes later, he was pale. She knows, Laura's blood froze, knows, not everything, but she knows there's something wrong. She asked us to talk tonight, at the estate, everyone together. What are we going to do? Thomas held her hands. We're going to tell her the truth before she finds out from someone else. Laura nodded, but the fear was overwhelming. They returned to the estate that evening. The house was decorated, beautiful, full of life, a cruel contrast to what was coming. Mrs. Eleanor waited for them in the main living room. Uncle Marcus, aunts, cousins, everyone was present. "Sit," she instructed. Thomas and Laura sat on the couch, hands intertwined. "My almost fatal experience," Mrs. Eleanor began, "made me think about legacies, truths, and lies we tell to protect those we love." Thomas swallowed hard. "Grandmother, let me finish." She raised her hand. "Thomas, I've known you since birth. I know when you're hiding something. And this week I saw you hiding something big." The silence was dense. "But I also saw," she continued, looking at Laura, "real love. Awkward, scared, but real." Laura blinked, confused. "You don't know everything?" "I knew it was a deception. Yes." Mrs. Eleanor smiled sadly. "I found the document. In your office, Thomas, before we came to the estate." Shock exploded in the room. Thomas froze. "Then, you knew from the start?" "I knew it was a deception, yes, but I also saw the deception transform into truth. I saw my grandson smile again, live, risk his heart." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, voice breaking. "I never wanted to deceive you. I just wanted to keep control of the company, prove something to yourself, avoid admitting you were still hurt." She nodded. "I know, and I was complicit, because I needed you to perceive that life isn't just strategy, that love is worth the risk." Laura sat in shock. "So, you're not angry?" "I'm disappointed in the lie, but grateful for the result." Mrs. Eleanor stood with effort. Thomas hurried to help. "The question now is, what are you going to do?" Thomas looked at Laura. "We're going to do it right. No lies. Build something real." "And the money?" Uncle Marcus interjected cynically. "The 80,000 from the contract?" Laura had almost forgotten. "I won't accept it. Not after—" "You will accept it," Mrs. Eleanor said firmly. "You did a job. You deserve payment. Besides, consider it an investment in your real wedding when it happens." "Real wedding?" Laura repeated, disoriented. Thomas dropped to one knee in front of her, in front of the whole family. "Laura Morris, over the last 5 days you taught me that love isn't weakness, that vulnerability is courage, that it's worth risking your heart." He held her hands. "I know we started wrong. I know I have no right to ask. But I'm asking anyway. Stay with me. Not because of a contract, not for money, just because we both deserve a real chance." Tears streamed down Laura's face. "Is this a proposal?" "It's a promise of a proposal. When we're ready. When it's the right time." He smiled through his own tears. "But for now, it's me begging for you to give me a chance." Laura pulled him up and kissed him. The room erupted in applause. "That's a yes?" Thomas murmured against her lips. "It's a definitely yes." Mrs. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. "Good. Now we can truly celebrate Christmas." 5 years later. The chapel on the estate was decorated with white hydrangeas and soft lights. Laura adjusted her veil, looking at her reflection in the old mirror. The wedding dress was simple, elegant, perfect. "Nervous?" Mrs. Eleanor appeared behind her, radiant in her lavender dress. "A little. You shouldn't be. You've been together for 5 years. This is just the official seal." Laura smiled. After that Christmas, she and Thomas did it right. Real dating, introductions to friends, trips, arguments and reconciliations, building genuine life. Her decoration business flourished. Thomas expanded the business. They bought an apartment together, adopted a dog, lived. And now, finally, they would marry for real, in the chapel where everything started with lies. "It's time," Mrs. Eleanor announced. Laura walked down the aisle to the sound of violins. Thomas was at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his grey suit. When their eyes met, he smiled, that smile that was just hers. "Hi," he said when she reached the altar. "Hi," she answered, laughing through tears. The priest began the ceremony, and when it came time for vows, Thomas held her hands. "Laura, 5 years ago, I paid you to pretend to love me. It was the best and worst decision of my life. Best because you came to me. Worst, because I almost lost you through my fear." He squeezed her hands. "Today I make a real vow. No contracts, no conditions. I love you. I will love you every day that comes. And when people ask how we met, I'll tell the truth. You were my Christmas reward, the gift I never knew I needed." Laura could barely see through tears. "Thomas, when I accepted your contract, I was desperate. I needed money, an out. But what I found was so much more. You taught me that true love isn't a transaction. It's choice. Every day, choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing to believe." She smiled. "And I choose you, today, tomorrow, always." When the priest declared them husband and wife, the kiss was long, deep, full of promises. The family applauded. Mrs. Eleanor cried with joy. At the reception, as they danced the first dance, Thomas pulled Laura closer. Happy, ridiculously. Even though it started with a lie, especially because it started with a lie, it forced us to build something real. Thomas hugged her tighter. "I love you, wife. For real this time. I love you, husband. It was always real." The night progressed in celebration, laughter, dancing, toasts. And when they finally went up to the room, that same room from that first night, Thomas carried Laura through the door. "Now," he whispered against her lips, "I can finally fulfill the promise of the title." "What promise?" "To reward you at night in bed." But this time, he laid her down gently, not as payment, as celebration, as love. And it was exactly that. Love, real, deep, eternal. They made love until dawn, rediscovering each other, celebrating the journey that brought them there. And when the sun rose over the estate, painting everything gold, Laura lay on Thomas's chest, hearing his heart beat strong. "Happy?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Absurdly, even starting with a lie. Especially because it started with a lie. It forced us to build something true." Thomas held her tighter. "I love you, wife. Really this time. I love you, husband. It was always real." And there, in that room where everything had begun 5 years before, they fell asleep intertwined. Two hearts that learned that sometimes the best love is born from the most unlikely beginnings, that contracts can lead to connections, that lies can reveal truths, and that true rewards aren't measured in money. They're measured in shared laughter, in dried tears, in safe hands in the darkness, in whispered promises, in daily choices to stay, to love, to build, together. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to comment saying what was your favorite part. Share with friends and family who need to hear this message of hope. To continue supporting stories like this and have access to exclusive content, consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the Become a Member button below. Every donation helps us continue bringing inspiring stories like this to you. Comment below what was your favorite part and what story you'd like to hear next.